secular too. Now remember I said I could have had you get in small groups and write your definition of the secular? My guess is most of you would have written a secular too definition. Or the way the media often uses the secular is they often mean a secular too definition. So secular too could be defined as fewer and fewer people are going to church. Or our religious institutions are weaker and weaker. So the public and private divide gets kind of radicalized, or we feel an intensity to it where it feels like a-religious spaces just keep growing and overtaking people's interests, and religious spaces keep shrinking. You know, maybe a really common one you feel is it just feels like in middle class settings, youth sports just keeps growing, and families' imaginations and religious space keeps shrinking. There's almost not even a thought. AAU basketball or get to church on Sunday morning. You know, like these things just, they're not even thought through. It just feels like the a-religious space keeps growing and the religious space keeps shrinking. So we tend to assume we are in a secular age because people are just not as interested in going to church as they used to. Our seminaries are smaller and weaker. My gosh, some of our congregations are being turned into microbreweries. I mean, maybe some of you celebrate that. I don't know. I don't want to make any judgment. But, you know, maybe you really like microbreweries. But there is a sense like, you know, some urban churches are being turned into high-end lofts. See, this is a reality of the secular. Now, we should say that this is true. I mean, we should be worried about this. And we can look across mainline denominations that there obviously has been a shrinking and a weakening of these institutional structures. There's no doubt that is true. But I had a friend, former student who's now a friend, who's pastor of a fairly big church, maybe mid-sized church for the Twin Cities, a couple hundred people, and he called me up and said, I have to tell you I did something terrible. And he told me I could tell you what he did. So this is a warning to you, don't ever do this. What he did, it's really bad, is he Googled his church. Yeah. Don't ever Google your church. It will eat your soul away if you Google your church. Because I don't know if you know this or not, but of course, some of you know this better than I do, but you can Google review anything. And so what he noticed when he Googled his church is that his church had like 12 Google reviews. So then he did the worst thing, which you should absolutely never, ever do if you care about the constitution of your soul. Do not read Google reviews about your church. He did that. And he told me he thought he could get away with it because he had 4.8 stars out of 5 and thought, you know, I could use some affirmation today. I'm going to read these. And they all were really positive. Like the first one said, we love this church. The carpets are always clean at this church. 5 stars. Second one said, we love this church. We feel very comfortable putting our daughter in the nursery. This church is committed to sanitizing the nursery toys on a regular basis. 5 stars. Third one said, this church is great. We drive 25 minutes to go to this church. The preaching sometimes makes us laugh. 5 stars. And on they went. And he said as he read them, he got this deep, sinking dread come over him because he realized every single one was written in the same format as an Airbnb review. Yeah. It was all about the amenities. And this becomes a deep temptation. Like if we think our issue, and most of us I think tend to assume what it means to live in a secular age or the challenges of the secular age, is that the religious space is shrinking, the a-religious space is growing. So somehow we have to fight to win a little bit back. I mean, we need a little bit more of the religious space, and the best congregation, the best pastor will grow just a little bit more of that space, maybe a lot more if you have real deep ambitions, will grow that space over and against the a-religious space. Now again, I want to say that this is an issue. I mean, I teach in a denominational seminary. We are very, very aware that we lose another 12, 13% of membership. Do we need 6 seminaries throughout the denomination right now? I mean, if we lose more people, I mean, I like my job. I want to keep my job. Maybe we don't need all the seminaries we need. So this is an issue. In most churches in America, I don't know how well it's represented in this room, but most churches in America, they say overwhelmingly, are one roof leak away from never recovering. I mean, one roof leak that you were not prepared for, you will never recover from. That's the majority of churches in America. $700,000 bill, not expected, will sink a huge majority of churches in America. So this is a huge issue. So when I say I think this is an issue, it is an issue. I also want to say I'm not sure it's what it really means to live in a secular age. I have a feeling, I sense that this is kind of the red herring. That this tends to be what we think the issue is, but there may be another issue at play here. But where it really gets us, I think, is that it tends to move from demonstrate to participate. So in the midst of this kind of feeling of secular too, we start to assume that the best congregation and the best pastor is the one who can win more participants. Now, of course, this doesn't happen at a very sophisticated conference like this, but I'm always amazed as pastors meet each other. The first question always is, where are you from? So you say where you're from. But almost the second question, not here, of course. Second question is, how big's your church? And I know partly that's just fodder for getting to know someone. Another level it always is a little bit of, are you a successful person or are you not? And there's a huge sense of that. Am I being pulled off of, there we go. I don't know. For a minute I thought those were cigarettes or something. This is a very strange conference. Okay. That's true. I thought I was either going to be walked out of here or given some Marlboro Lights. I don't know. Okay. So again, you see how this demonstrate moves to participate. We can kind of feel that. And I think we often feel like we have to find some market share here. If we don't find some market share, we're in trouble. Again, I don't want to be Pollyanna. I don't want to put my head in the sand. This is an issue. But I'm not sure it's really what it means to live in a secular age. I think what it means to live in a secular age is what we'll call secular 3. All right, so now you have a lot of seculars in your mind. So secular 1 is this division in our imagination between public and private, and secular 2 is that fewer and fewer people are going to church. What is secular 3? This is secular 3. Secular 3 is living in the conditions of a society where all belief, all forms of belief, become contested. Or another way of saying that a little bit more poetically is living in a time where all forms of belief become fragilized. All belief becomes quite fragile. So when you think about secular 3, it has both a positive and a negative to it. But I don't want you to think of this as like there's a good thing and there's a bad thing. I want you to think of it like a battery and a remote where you have to line up the plus and minus to get it to operate. That's the extent of my electrical engineering knowledge right there. It's just the plus and minus have to be lined up. But secular 3 has both a kind of positive charge and a negative charge. So we start with the negative charge. The negative charge of living in a secular 3 reality is that transcendence as an overall meaning system becomes more and more unbelievable to people. And not even as a statement of confession or belief. They just have a hard time holding on to an imagination where there's a living God who moves throughout history. It actually takes them a lot of imaginative work to just remember that. The whole kind of current of the society and the culture they live in is to not recognize that, to not see that. So transcendence as an overall meaning system becomes very hard. So the kind of days of the kind of evangelistic atheists have kind of dissipated. But people can just find themselves kind of forgetting that there's a God, or forgetting in a way that if God calls and orders their life in a certain way. So you could be at a coffee shop and you could overhear two people talking. And they could say, one person could say to the other, I was going to this church for a while, but things just got weird. So I went to this different church, and that didn't really fit me, and I don't know, it's been a real struggle for me. So I guess what I'm going to do is, I just feel like for the next 6 months or so, I just need to take a break from God. I'm just going to take a break from God. And the person across from me hears that, and they kind of like, yeah, I get that. And there you are listening in, and you're a pastor, and you're kind of like, yeah, I kind of get that. I kind of get how that's going. I mean, that's one of the conditions of living in this kind of cultural context. I mean, again, if one of our ancestors could listen through a wormhole, a medieval person hearing us say, we're going to take a break from God would have been the most illogical comment they could have ever imagined. It'd be like us saying we're going to take a break from breathing for a while. You just couldn't do it. But we now live in a kind of culture milieu where you could imagine, or people do imagine, they could take a break from God for a while. So transcendence as an overall meaning system, the sense that there's a living, speaking God, becomes more and more unbelievable to people. It's hard for them to hold on to that, to remember that. So that becomes the negative reality. The positive reality, however, again, not pejorative, but just the kind of positive charge, is people feel a desperation. They feel compelled, a compelled desperation to construct meaning and purpose for themselves. So this creates a very odd kind of secular age. It creates a secular age where it is littered with a surplus of all sorts of spiritualities. People are trying to be spiritual everywhere. I I come from the tradition that that is not a sign that we are living in a post-secular age. That's a sign that we are living in a fully secular age. That belief is so fragilized that you can kind of individually just pick it as you go. And you have to feel so compelled to find meaning and purpose that you are willing to go and find all sorts of spiritualities. So if you're at that same coffee shop, now you're being a very weird person at this coffee shop, but you see from someone across the room and you go up to them and say, hey, I have been noticing you. I've noticed you're a very spiritual person. Most people in our culture will be like, well, yeah, I am. Well, thank you very much. I have 3 meditation apps on my phone. I am a very, very deeply spiritual person. Very few people will take it as an insult to call them spiritual. Now you all know it's a very obvious fact. You said, hey, I've noticed you across the room, you're a very religious person. They might be like, what does that mean? What are you getting at? But everyone takes it as a compliment to be spiritual. We deeply want to be spiritual. But you also know as a pastor, the challenge of that is at that coffee shop in line, you turn to someone behind, you're like, oh, hey, and you're introducing yourself. Well, what do you do? And you say, well, I'm a pastor. Like, that is so cool. That is great. That's really cool. I'm a spiritual person too. But I mean, I don't need church. I don't really need church. I walk my dog in the woods every Sunday morning. That's my church. Like, these woods are my cathedral. So people can live this kind of sense of spirituality out how they wish, and they have a sense, and we'll talk about this tomorrow, it's a kind of buffet table of spiritualities they can come and pick from. And what happens here is they all become equalized. So if you are in a classic form of religion, you're a Presbyterian pastor, or you're a Methodist pastor, or you run meditation retreats with LSD, it's kind of assumed they're all kind of the same. If they can help you find purpose and meaning, they're all kind of equalized. And you use them until they don't work. And they eventually won't work, because that's the reality of living in the fragilization of belief. So we become very aware, living inside this cultural context, that there are people who believe very different things than we do. And for the most part, we kind of have a sense that they're doing all right, Like at the very least, they go to all their kids' soccer games, and you only go to 60% of them. Or, right after the garbage man comes, they get their cans in right away. It takes you until Thursday, that there's people who believe very different things. For people in our congregations, this is probably more tacit than explicit, but they are very aware, in a kind of maybe tacit way, that they could believe something very different and pretty much live the same life. They could believe something very different than they believe now, and they could still be a dental hygienist. You don't lose your job as a dental hygienist if you believe something very different than you do now. So this reality has this both positive and negative charge. But there's another dynamic to this, and a lot of this that I'm basing off is from a philosopher named Charles Taylor, who's written this big, thick book. It's 770 pages. Big, huge book. Perfect book to keep your door open on a very windy day. And it will do the trick. But the crazy thing about this book, 770 pages, he only wants to answer one question. One question with 770 pages. And it gets worse. He only wants to answer one question for one narrow part of the world. He only wants to answer a question for those he calls the leftovers of Latin Christendom. So those in the West. Western Europe, North America, South America, those who come from the kind of Catholic Western Christianity. He wants to know why in these societies that we live in. If you go back and you just use big round numbers, in 1500 in those societies, it was nearly impossible to live in one of those societies and not believe in God. You couldn't function in 1500 and not believe in God. And yet in a short 500 years, so just stop at the big round number of 2000, completely flipped. In most of those societies, it's easier to not believe in God than to believe in God. Now, we could quibble with that as Americans, but that is definitely true in France. That is definitely true in the Scandinavian countries. That is definitely true in the UK. He wants to know what happened. I basically told you a bit of that story. But again, 770 pages, and the thing that will make your head really spin is you do pretty much need to read it 4 times before it starts making sense. So it's a tough one. But some of us keep reading it 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 times, and it's so long because he says really interesting things. And one of the things he says that's really fascinating is he says this kind of fragilization of secular 3, it's a two-way fragilization. It works in 2 directions. So he thinks it works like this. He says if you're someone who believes, which he counts himself a practicing Catholic, he says if you're someone who believes, you can't help it. You're going to have moments where you find your belief fragilized. You're going to have moments where you think to yourself, ooh, is this true? Or is this just the family I grew up in? If I would have grown up in another family, another part of the world, would I believe this? No, I believe it, I believe it, I believe it. You go on. And then you find your belief fragilized again. And you think, religion, is this really pointing to something true? Or maybe all religion is an evolutionary trick. Maybe this is all just false pattern recognition all the way down. No, I believe it, I believe it, I believe it. Says you can't help it. Living in this kind of secular age, if you're someone who believes and believes genuinely, you are going to have moments where you find that belief fragilized. Preaching and leading your congregation, there are people moving in and out of these moments of fragilization. But he says it works the other way as well. He says, let's say you're a young adult, you live somewhere hip and cool like, Austin, Texas, or Brooklyn or something, and you've been to an elite university, and come on. Religion? I mean, you know what religion is. You're an educated person. All religion is a historical reality used by powerful people to keep other people down. And when you die, you go to heaven. Come on, grow up. Your life is like a TV set. It's on. When you die, it's unplugged. It goes blank. It's over. It's done. It's off. It's finished. That's what happens when you die. What you believe is that you don't believe. He says if that's you, you too will have a moment where you find your unbelief fragilized and you have moments of believing. So for instance, your sister says, you've got to come hear your nephew's Christmas concert. You don't want to go. But Christmas Eve is coming, and you know there's going to be conflict if you don't show up to this thing. So you wait till the last performance of this Christmas concert. You show up in the back of the concert hall. You make sure before the lights go down that you wave to your sister so you get the points for being there. But you are just there to keep family peace. But the lights go down, and it starts. Boom, boom, boom. It's a Bach concert. And in the midst of that dark theater, you feel it. That music washes over you, and you feel grabbed for. You feel held. You feel spoken to by something. The beauty it crushes you while putting you back together. It's this utter moment of feeling connected to something bigger than you. And you have a moment where your unbelief is fragilized, and you have a moment of believing. Or we know another one from interviews. People will say things like, oh, you think that your life has any meaning? Do you have any sense of how huge the universe is? You think your life, you have some kind of purpose on this life? You think so? And you have any idea how small you are? How insignificant you are? You can't. You actually can't. You can't get your mind around how huge this universe is. It is so huge, and it's continuing to expand, by the way. And you think that you matter? I mean, first of all, our galaxy is just this out-of-the-way little galaxy, and our solar system is just in the corner, in the side of over here, and then our Earth is like a piece of dust in the midst of all of this. And your lifetime on that piece of dust, it can't even register. And you think your life has any purpose or meaning? I see what I think is I think my life has no purpose and meaning. And, that's what helps me sleep at night. I don't know how those people function, but you'll hear that said. But then, those same people who say there is no purpose in the world have their first child. And they pick that baby up for the first time, and they will say they feel something. And it's more than just that child reach their hand for their fingers. It's like, I feel like I've known her forever. Like someone was born to take care of her. Like somehow my whole purpose is just to cherish and love her. And for a moment, they have their unbelief fragilized, and they have a moment of believing. Or maybe just one more. Your mother's sick, and you know the end is near. But to your surprise, it went quite fast, and you weren't able to be home as she died, but you get a call, and you book a flight, you rent the car, you get to your hometown, you're there for the funeral, you're there for the burial. Luckily, you have a cousin in town who's allowing you to stay at his place. So you finish the night, very sad day, funeral, burial. You stay up late at your cousin's house. You're just talking about your mother. And your siblings are there, your cousins are there. And you're telling stories about your mom and crying and then laughing as you tell stories about her. Your brother says, remember how Mom, when she would always clean the kitchen? Remember she'd always put on that 80s song, Come On Eileen? Remember when she'd sweep, she'd put on Come On Eileen, and then she would do this dance with her hips, and then she would always sing into the top of the broom, and she would always do that when her friends were over. Remember when she would do that? And you laugh really hard because it makes you miss your mom, and you cry, and you go to bed. And you wake up the next morning, you have an early flight, you got to get back home, and you realize you've overslept your alarm, you throw all your clothes into your bag, you rush out to that rental car that's parked in your cousin's driveway, you turn on that car to get to the airport, you've left the radio on. And there it is on the radio, that same song. Come on, Eileen, yeah, I swear what I mean. And you have a choice. You can think to yourself, oh my gosh, Jeffrey Bezos is listening to everything we say all the time. Completely legitimate response inside of this secular. Or you can wonder, is there something bigger out there? Is there something who has a mind for me and cares even about my suffering? And this is the reality of living in this kind of secular age. Actually, they're both logical responses inside of this kind of secular age. So the point is, whether you are someone who believes and have that belief fragilized, or you're someone who doesn't believe and have moments where that unbelief is fragilized and you have moments of believing, what we all share, he thinks, is that we all live our lives together, seeing our lives inside of or through what he calls an immanent frame. So one of the things that Charles Taylor believes, that I tend to agree with him quite a bit, is that we are interpreting creatures. What it means to be human is we're always interpreting our life. I mean, just hang out with adolescents and they're like, what does that mean? You know, like we're always, whatever it means to be human is we're always trying to interpret, what does this mean? We're always hermeneutical creatures. And yet, we don't interpret our lives from nowhere. Our culture, our society we're in, it gives us a lens in which to see the world. And the lens we tend to see the world through, that is given to us by our institutions and the ways we are educated and things like that, so we tend to see our world through what he calls an immanent frame. As opposed to a transcendent frame, he sees it as an immanent frame. For a medieval person in secular zero, the frame you tend to see the world through is a supernatural or a transcendent one. So if something uncanny or weird happens, the first inclination, the first reflex response is to assume that there must be a demon or a devil at play, that God must be wanting to speak to us. I mean, if something really strange was to happen in here, I don't know, like one of those lights was to fall off the wall. If you're a person seeing the world through a kind of transcendent or supernatural frame, your first presumption is, there's something at work. I mean, here are all people who have taken vows to preach the gospel. And of course, the devil is trying to interrupt this. When you see the world through an immanent frame, my first response would be, well, who put that up? You know, I mean, how long does metal and bolts hold up before it corrodes? I would presume first a natural material response. It would take me more imaginative work to assume that it was a transcendent or a spiritual reality than a natural material one. So this is what Charles Taylor says. There's a picture of him. He says, the immanent frame is a constructed social space that frames our lives entirely within a natural rather than a supernatural order. It is a circumscribed space of the modern social imaginary that precludes transcendence. All right, if you struggle with insomnia, what I would suggest is take a picture of this, and then before you go to bed, just start reading it over and over again. They do say scientifically that philosophers' quotes do have tryptophan in them, like turkey. It makes you very, very tired. So what I need for this to make a bit of sense is I need some pop stars' lyrics to help that make sense. All right, so this seems like I'm taking you into, you know, like I'm showing my cool cred here. Actually, this is a song that's like 14 years old. So don't pay attention to that. Just think I'm cool. I'm old now. I need it. So this is a song for the British pop star Lily Allen. Do you remember Lily Allen? It's the most controversial thing I'll say. Lily Allen is who Katy Perry is trying to be. So if you're a Katy Perry fan, you are really mad at me. But I did not insult Taylor Swift, so by American law, you are not allowed to hurt me. If I would have insulted Taylor, you could actually hurt me. You have impunity to hurt me. So here's Lily Allen. The thing you need to know about it is very irreverent. Poppy, but very irreverent. So she has this song called The Fear, and this gives you a vibe of it. She says, life's about film stars and less about mothers, but it doesn't matter because I'm packing plastic, and that's what makes my life so effing fantastic. I have to tell you people, I have no idea what that means. No clue at all. I think it's kind of dangerous to exegete pop stars' lyrics, so I'm not really sure what this means. Packing plastic probably means she has a credit card with a major credit limit on it. I think more than likely it probably means she's had one part of her body medically enhanced. But nevertheless, this becomes the measure of the good life, but you can get it. The kind of irreverence, again, you have to hear a kind of poppy tune in your head. But here's the one I want you to see. She says, now I'm a weapon of massive consumption. It's not my fault, it's how I'm programmed to function. Now here it is. Now, I'm not a saint, but I'm not a sinner. Now, everything's cool as long as I'm getting thinner. No, I'm not a saint. I'm not a sinner. Now, everything's cool as long as I don't get thinner. The middle finger is being waved in your face, obviously. It's said with tongue fully in cheek, but what she means is a really interesting assertion. She's essentially saying she has never once not lost any sleep, wondering if she is a saint or a sinner. She has never woken up in the middle of the night in terror, wondering if she's a saint or a sinner. Of course, Martin Luther, when he was a monk in the Erfurt Monastery, woke up every night in terror, wondering if he was a saint or if he was a sinner. On the eve of the Reformation, or what burst the Reformation, is his terror. Is he a saint or is he a sinner? How does he please this God who puts the ought on him to please this God? Everything he tries, he cannot please this God. He cannot fulfill this God's ought that rests so squarely on his shoulders. He wonders, could this God even be good? If this God asks me to fulfill this and I can't fulfill it. I mean, once Martin Luther went to his confessional and confessed his sins for 6 straight hours. 6 straight hours. We've already made a Lord of the Ring reference. I mean, that's 2 Lord of the Ring movies. He confessed his sins for 2 Lord of the Ring movies, back to back. The story goes, he left his confessional, thought to himself, I feel good. I feel unburdened. And then went, oh, maybe it's bad to feel good. And turned around and tried to start confessing his sins again. His confessor was like locking up the confessional. Was like, Marty, no. You got to go actually do some stuff, and then we can talk about this. I can't. I'm exhausted. I can't do this. But Luther couldn't sleep, and of course he rereads Romans, which we'll be taken deeply into, and he has this breakthrough where he realizes maybe his greatest theological constructive perspective comes out of this. He realizes it's not an either or. It's a both and it's called Luther's Symbol. And for Northern Europeans, it was a balm for 500 years. All the way up until 2012 in this pop star. We're not going to give her that much credit. But she essentially says, not once has she woken up in the middle of the night like Martin Luther, not been able to sleep, wondering, is she a saint or is she a sinner? Is she bound for heaven or bound for hell? But what's fascinating is she has lost sleep. She has woken up in the middle of the night in absolute terror, not being able to fall asleep. She has felt the pinching burden of guilt. It's just that its referent is not a holy other God and God's law and command. What she feels is the imminent reality. Swimsuit season's coming. What are people going to think about my body? So even the deepest terror, even what produces guilt now is imminent as opposed to transcendent. I don't know if you've hung out with, I'm saying this tongue in cheek too, I don't know if you've hung out with upwardly mobile middle class people, but they are incredibly guilt-ridden people. They feel so much guilt. It's really quite surprising because Voltaire told us if we could get these priests and Christianity off our back, we'd never feel guilty again. You talk to Americans in the first 3 decades of the 21st century, upwardly mobile ones, they are incredibly guilty. But what's fascinating is the referent of their guilt is not God and God's command. The reference of their guilt is themselves. They let themselves down. They could have done more, but they didn't do it. Why didn't they start eating right years ago? Why didn't they start exercising? They didn't know about that diet and that exercise that they should have known about. But, why didn't they? Why didn't they start the business? They should have started the business. Why didn't they try to do this? They should have done that. Why didn't they raise their kids this way? They just read that you're supposed to do 8 things before your kid's 8, and your kid is 9, and you're screwed. They could have done all this stuff. They feel this utter burden of guilt. But you see, it's not a transcendent reality. It's an imminent reality. This is the imminent frame. So Charles Taylor says this. He says, we can't help looking over our shoulders from time to time, looking sideways, living in a condition of doubt and uncertainty. Lily Allen has the same experience where she says, I don't know what's right or what's real anymore. I don't know what it's meant to feel anymore. When do you think it all becomes clear? Because I'm being overtaken by the fear. So she even has this deep sense of the anxiety. She can give you this kind of middle finger in your face, but she has this sense of the fear that comes near to her. All right, now what we should do is I should play this song for you, right? I have to redeem my cool cred. So I want to play a song, this will be too obvious. I want to play a song from you from an independent band. So I've given you a sleep tactic. Now the next life hack I'm giving you. So if you ever need to feel cool in a room, you just say, I've been listening to an independent band. And that automatically people have to, metaphysically, think you're cool. So I want to play a song from an independent band. The band is Purple Mountains. Does anyone know Purple Mountains? Great, I'm the coolest person in the room. Okay, so that's In a Bit of Bed called Purple Mountains, and the song is called Margaritas at the Mall. So I'm going to play this for you, and I want you just to pick out a lyric that you find, you'll see the lyrics come up, just pick out a lyric that you find interesting. Two things you need to know about this song. The first one is that the singer-songwriter, he sounds a bit like Johnny Cash, which I think is kind of cool, but I have to apologize to you because this is a very catchy song. And about 2 weeks from now, you're still going to be humming margaritas at the mall. And you know, you're going to be unloading the dishwasher and humming margaritas at the mall. Or if you're of age to use the bathroom in the middle of the night, you're going to be walking back to your bed, humming margaritas at the mall. But when that happens, I want you to stop. And I want you to pray. And I want you to say, God, are you telling me now to go onto Amazon and buy an Andy Root book? Okay, that's a complete joke. That's just my way of outing the pietists in the room. Because some of you always lean forward like, please tell me to do something. Please tell me to do it. Complete joke. I mean, you can do it if you want to. I'm not going to stop you. But so it is a catchy song. The second thing you need to know, however, is more relevant, is that this is this guy named David Berman, who's the leader of this band. He's never spent a day in church in his life. He's not someone who grew up in a church. He's not a former youth group kid. But now he's asking really deep questions. So what lyric jumps out to you? We'll probably have to pump up the volume a little.